is Zaihan Rashid from Happy Strong Family here with a very special season, a very special session about Ramadan, and in particular about what we maybe don't realize. People that are not of Muslim faith, people that don't necessarily understand Ramadan. Sometimes people don't even really understand the concept of why would it even be necessary. In the words of some of the people that I know, why would you need to starve yourself all day, or why would you be subjecting yourself to this kind of thing? So on the today's show, we have a very special guest, Manali Patil, who has very kindly agreed to come and join us in what some people would find an intimidating invitation, but she has very kindly agreed to come and share her thoughts with her. So I want to welcome her, Manali. Very
Thank you for
welcome.
having me. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. And to first just ask you a little bit about yourself,
Mhm.
if you would like to give the audience, the people that are watching, a brief introduction. I know you are a student.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us anything else about what your interests are, what you like to do outside your curriculum work?
Yeah. So right now I'm in grade 11. I'm interested in pursuing a career in health science. I'm not sure about the specifics, but I do
Sure.
know that I want to go into that career pathway. I really love to be able to make a difference or to help people. So yeah.
That's very encouraging. And that's something that we are seeing in a minority, unfortunately, of our youngsters, where there is a clear path that they see for themselves. So that's very encouraging. I have to
Mhm.
say that when I hear from a young person that they know what they want to do, and they have the, if you like, a roadmap laid out for them, and they've kind of formulated it for themselves.
Mhm.
So since the topic today that we're going to talk about really is Ramadan in particular, and Ramadan now for many people is just what I have heard from, not now, but in the past, from people who describe what is this session of hunger and thirst that you bring
Yeah.
upon yourself. Because reminding ourselves, Ramadan does not always occur at the same time of the year.
Mhm.
It's not based around solar months, which means it's not like January, February, all the way to December,
Mhm.
but it's more, if you like, the lunar months. Moons.
Yeah.
What that means is lunar cycle or the moon cycle is about 10 days shorter than the sun or the solar cycle.
Mhm.
So, which means that this cycle moves every year. And so last year, Ramadan sort of started perhaps around the 1st of April,
Mhm.
but this year is started on the 23rd of March.
Okay.
And so, and next year, inshallah, God willing, if we are still, I'm still here, then it will start on March 10th or 12th, something like that.
Okay.
So that's the kind of shift it takes place. So, Manali, just so that we put our audience into this kind of thinking mode, you can imagine that perhaps 5 years ago, 8 years ago, the month of Ramadan occurred somewhere in the middle of summer,
Yeah.
July and August. So at that time in particular, that would be very intimidating and very challenging for a lot of us. Not only was it the fact that it was hot in this part of the world even, but it was also long.
Yeah.
So my first inquiry about how what your thoughts are on this is, would you mind sharing with the audience and myself what was the source of your knowledge about Ramadan? If you do know anything, I'm assuming you know a lot,
Yes.
but can I ask you what was your source of this information?
Yeah, so fortunately, I'm able to have very close Muslim friends. And through that, I was able to get a direct source of what Ramadan is. So they would explain to me their practices and culture and their beliefs around Ramadan as well.
Mm.
And I think through having a direct source, it doesn't allow any misinterpretation. So I know that Ramadan is a time of fasting. And the reason behind fasting is not just like starving yourself, as some people may believe, but to be in the place of people in poverty or poor people who aren't allowed to, who weren't able to eat or get food
Okay.
and stuff. Yeah.
Okay, that's definitely one very noble aspect of it,
Yes.
to get to know the feeling of those who don't have some of the blessings that we have, in that we assume that there'll be food ready, for example, at dinner time.
Yeah.
We know that there will be water, safe water, lots of water
Yeah.
available for us. The practices of Ramadan definitely are based, one aspect of it is based around that. Before I go on to elaborate this a little bit further, um, how did you find this information make you think? What did you think of this information when you heard this? And did you have any personal feelings about whether you think good of it, or you think, well, yes, that's a great thing these guys do? Do
Yeah.
you have any such tradition that you've heard of, any in any other cultural or religious practices that you're aware of?
Well, not well for fasting. So in my religion, I'm Hindu.
Okay.
Sometimes on days of puja or prayer,
Okay.
we would have to fast in the morning before praying to God.
Okay.
And I think, yeah, when my friends told me about Ramadan and the fasting aspect, as you said, I think it was a very noble concept.
Yeah.
To be able to know what these people are going through is honestly a really great way
Okay.
of life. Yeah.
Okay. And for the audience, we have to remind ourselves that Ramadan originally is an order, is a, if you like, a decision made by the one that has created us. We
Mhm.
believe that God, Allah, whatever language we use to describe him, knows us best as to what will benefit us.
Mhm.
And so the tradition of fasting indeed is placed in all the previous traditions of, if you like, religions. So
Mhm.
you will find this in Christianity, it's definitely present in Judaism. Uh, as you said, it is also mentioned in other religious groups like Hindus. So this idea of self denial or sacrifice, or the concept of postponing gratification
Yeah.
in a very wider term of the word, is actually considered a very noble thing.
Yeah.
And although, Malini, there's no question that Ramadan in general is classed as people not eating, people not drinking, and people suffering perhaps, or pretending to feel like others. Really, one very other big aspect is the moral correction that one is intended to and one's supposed to make.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It means that Muslims are not supposed to lie while they're fasting.
Mhm.
They're not supposed to think bad of others who are not fasting.
Mhm.
They are not, in fact, they're particularly told to avoid the major moral transgressions, like thinking bad is one, but then sometimes there's also things like backbiting, for example. Backbiting simply means describing others in a manner in which they would not like to be described. So I'm elaborating this because sometimes I find fasting becomes confined to the concept of eating and drinking only.
Yeah.
But you're not supposed to disrespect your parents while you're fasting.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to not help others because you're fasting, or you're not supposed to check out of life, as it were, to
Mhm.
say, well, I'm fasting, don't expect me to smile.
That's-
I'm fasting, don't expect me to do my share of the work. And Malini, you're not fasting, so you do all this work. I'm not going to play any sport. I'm just going to be like a, miserable person. That's not the idea
Yeah.
at all. So my second question on those same lines would be, Malini, what would your preference be if you were, for example, somebody who didn't have a Muslim friend, and as you said, you have more than a few, as a person who does not have the understanding of this tradition, would you have a preference to find out this information? If you were curious, for example, where would you go to look for such information if you were to be looking? Or have
Yeah.
you known somebody? I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just want to see, how do people perceive such a knowledge source? For example, if you don't have a live Muslim source like you do,
Yes.
what would be the other source you would think of in such situation?
I think Google mainly.
Okay.
The internet, it has a lot of sources, but I think I would have to be very careful because sometimes media can persuade people's opinions
Yeah.
to a negative or a positive way.
Yeah.
So you have to just get a bunch of credible sources, different sources, not
Yeah.
just stick to one.
Yeah.
And just, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And that's also, I think, very intelligent and very mature, coming from somebody who's relatively young and perhaps not as experienced. I'm very delighted to see that you have a very mature way of thinking, to say, I can't trust every bit of information that's on the net out there.
Yeah.
To give you a small example, prior to your agreeing to come on the show, I was desperately trying to find out a source
Yeah.
that would come and help us. Because in the end, Malini, no matter what we do and how we do it, it's really the perception of how it's seen by the majority. And let's face it, me and you from different cultures living in a Canadian environment do need to define ourselves a little bit transparently, in a
Yeah.
manner where Others can say they can smile while they're fasting.
Mm-hmm.
They can be nice and polite while they're fasting. And look, they still are those helpful people. They haven't changed. There's no
Yes.
metamorphosis. They don't seem to become an alien person
Yeah.
just because they haven't eaten a bit of food.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my personal feeling on all this, of course, in addition to the fact that uh, deprivation fasting is extremely beneficial for the physical upper physicality of it, meaning if you left the spiritual and the moral, the religious side of it away, just the fact that fasting is a beneficial thing, it's almost like healing from the inside.
Yeah.
There's more and more science behind this whole act of fasting,
Mm-hmm.
where people who don't have necessarily any tradition of a religious background, people who would go as far as saying there is no reason to worry about a god, just
Yeah.
take care of this body, those individuals have even identified that fasting is an extremely beneficial thing to avoid three major illnesses, three major, if you like, concepts. One is that I'm not lecturing you, I'm just
Yeah. No,
trying
of
to
course. Yes.
educate my audience
Yeah.
and myself that there is a physical advantage in that you will avoid diseases like diabetes, high blood pressure, even cancer. The second advantage is that you will become a more disciplined individual.
Yeah.
Imagine somebody avoids eating and drinking all day. Imagine somebody gets up at a really odd time within inverted commas, right? You
Mm-hmm.
get up before sunrise. In
Yeah.
fact, you get up before dawn.
Yeah.
So right now, we are finishing the early morning breakfast at 5:15.
Yeah.
So for 5:15 finish, meaning getting up at 4:30 minimum to be
Mm-hmm.
able to have something to eat. And that's recommended. It's the sunnah or the way of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So people, of course, can fast without eating anything in the morning, but he recommended that you should eat a little bit. You should do a favor to yourself by not literally starving yourself.
Yes.
The idea is never to punish yourself. Never
Yeah.
is that the idea. So the second benefit is the discipline part. And the third benefit, Malini, is what I really call the cherry on the cake. That is that it actually psychologically and emotionally makes you a stable human being.
Yeah.
That's something that few people realize, that there's now solid science behind it, both psychological information, people that are psychologists, but people even who have, if you like, a tradition that is more spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
They You will see in the Hindu tradition, I think, also, where people literally don't eat for days.
Yeah.
And the idea is the soul, the inside, I forget the name, but there's a word called Shakti in Hindi. Do you understand Hindi at all?
Yes, I
Yeah,
do a
so
little.
I understand a
Yes.
little bit of it.
Yes.
But I heard from one of my Hindu friends, I used to know a lot of them, and he said the Shakti, the strength,
Yes.
comes from the ability to deprive the self.
Yeah.
So I think that alone indicates that this tradition is shared by pretty much the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you've put it very nicely. I would go to a reliable source and I would check the background. This is what I advise all those who are watching this clip, that we should, when we look for information, make sure that the source is authentic.
Yeah.
And make some effort, because if it's important, it can't be just did a, I mean, I'm not saying Google is wrong,
Yeah.
but I'm saying Google is now full of so much information. It's like a sea of information.
That is
And
true.
to find the right information is kind of also very important.
Mm-hmm.
I have a third question for you. How can you, in your mind, this may be a little bit perhaps intense, but I just wanted your opinion on it. How can we promote better understanding amongst the different groups that live in this country?
Yeah.
And the reason I'm asking this is there's been, without question, in the last few months and years, attacks on Muslims
Yeah.
in various shapes and forms. Where I live across in the eastern side of Toronto, there was a school in which a Quran copy was torn by a young man. And there's clearly some very serious misunderstandings
Yeah.
amongst people who who have a perception that's almost ununderstandable. Say, how could you come to these conclusions? But before I say what I think has happened, I'd like your opinion as a young woman who is perhaps seeing these events or hearing about them in the papers and maybe through your Muslim friends.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think we can promote better understanding amongst the different groups? What would your thoughts be on that?
Yeah. So first, those type of stories are very sad to hear.
Mm.
But I think one way is just communication. We should be very transparent about our beliefs and our religions, especially living in Canada. There's so many diverse ethnicities, religions, people.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to be able to understand each other better. And the first step is, like I said, communication.
In your school, if you don't mind me
Yeah.
asking, have there been people that have made presentations? Have they done things that would help you? For example, just to give an example, Muslim students have, I think, and all students, I shouldn't say
Hmm.
Muslim students, all students, I think, have an opportunity to do things like assignments or
Yeah.
presentations. In your experience, have you seen such presentations by Muslims in the school where you are, where they, for example, made a presentation on Ramadan or something more challenging like the hijab, for example,
Yeah.
or some other similar thing that would, as you said, remove some of the misunderstandings and perhaps improve understanding and promote better relationships, better, a very cooperative and a conducive atmosphere for healthy living. I mean, Malini, I kind of almost sometimes shiver at the idea that there are people in the same space who hate each other's tradition.
Yeah.
And I'd like your insight and your input on that. If you have seen people elaborate on these things for a little bit for people to understand, what's
Mhm.
your experience been?
Well, particularly, I haven't seen any Muslim students present about their religion,
Okay.
but I do know, like now, like our school or YRDSB, it's trying to be more inclusive. So they will have presentations that say to stop hate and that kind of stuff. So they do take some active steps in that approach. But in my school, particularly, um, they introduce an Indigenous course,
Okay.
which allows us to learn more about Indigenous peoples as
Okay.
well. So I think that is another example
Yes.
of
Yes.
trying to like communicate about
Yes.
different ethnicities and
Yes.
yeah.
Have you, in your experience, seen students trying to get these programs or initiatives that have not been supported by the administration in the school? What do I mean by that? I mean, in particular, that the school where I went and I had a chance to speak to some of the students and a chance to speak to some of the teachers,
Mhm.
I got the impression that there was some difficulty in understanding each other's needs,
Yeah.
meaning that there is emphasis on some of the events that take place during the year.
Mhm.
We have Halloween, we have Valentine's Day, we have indeed the winter holidays,
Yeah.
and we have some other events occurring which have become a part of the tradition. But other things like Eid, for example, the end of Ramadan, or something like Holi,
Mhm.
or something else that allows people to see the diversity of the culture and the society we live in, don't seem to be that supported. And I'm wondering if that's because there is some misunderstanding or there is some genuine attempt to suppress information from coming out from anything else except Google, as you said,
Yeah.
which you can't stop. It's
Yeah.
pretty much it's a universal resource. So I'm wondering if, in your experience, people have tried and have not succeeded, or are they, in your opinion, and I'm only asking your opinions, don't
Mhm.
feel that you have to give it if you don't
Yes.
have, but I think you would have, in your perception, seen how Muslims are seen in general
Uh-huh.
in the school, for example,
Yeah.
and whether they're allowed to express themselves, perhaps through assignments, and maybe they have tried and they've not been allowed to, or maybe, as you said, perhaps they've never really tried.
Mhm.
And I'm just asking your perception to see whether such attempts could be done by students a bit more frequently, and if you know of people that have tried and didn't succeed,
Yeah.
etc.
Well, fortunately, I live in a very diverse school and a very welcoming school.
Mm.
And we have ISA, which is Islam Student Association.
Okay.
So I believe, like, through that, a lot of Muslim students are allowed to be supported and be in a space where they're welcome.
Okay.
I'm not sure what happens in that group because I'm not a
Of
part of
course.
it, but my friends, they say that it's a very welcoming and supportive place. And it's
Okay.
nice to see
Mm.
people in the school that
Mm.
are also Muslim and are
Mm.
also like them.
Mm.
Yeah.
And your, I mean, your friendship, of course, clearly shows an indication for you to be familiar with people of other
Yes.
backgrounds,
Yeah.
etc. Is that something you feel is a very supportive thing in general to promotion of good, conducive, and cooperative and almost friendly societies? And this, the reason I'm putting this across to you as a young person is I have seen misunderstanding. So this person who tore the Quran was a young person, and I was thinking, what possible information could he have had, accurate information, that would have made him want to destroy a book which he maybe doesn't even know.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether there is such Islamophobic atmosphere that you have noticed.
Hmm.
Please don't feel obliged to answer if you
Yes.
don't want to. But I was asking this from the students also to say, do you see such kind of atmosphere where this, I mean, from what I know, most people don't have this kind of attitude.
Hmm.
But clearly, there is some undercurrents of this in the school environment.
Hmm.
Maybe not in all schools, but this is by no means an only school that this happened.
Yeah.
This happened in Mississauga last year, where a girl's hijab was taken off. In fact, it was the beginning of this year, and producer Kashif can correct me. And there have been other events in schools in downtown. And there's this incident of a man who was trying to pray in Ottawa railway station, and somebody came and stopped him and said, "You're not allowed to pray." So there is that almost a phobic atmosphere about Islamic practices, about things which it's hard to understand what possible harm can a piece of garb on a girl's head do. What
Yes.
harm can a person who's bending down and putting his head in front of his creator, what potential challenge could you be doing to the society? So
Hmm.
I'm interested in your views. How do you perceive Muslims as perhaps not conveying themselves enough, or are they being made to do things, in your observation,
Hmm.
obviously, or are they just simply feeling too intimidated to even try? What's your impression on that?
Well, yeah. I think, yeah, this is a very heavy topic, and
It
it's
is.
definitely like, I don't think that it's Muslim people's fault that they're not like conveying themselves more, because no one should have to like explain,
Mm,
why they're doing something that's like that. And obviously, the other party just having an issue with that is
mm,
also like, if it doesn't affect you, then you shouldn't,
yeah,
right? But yeah, I think it's important to have friendships and be able to communicate with like diverse people. I don't want to only speak with just Hindu people, for
of course,
example. I want to be able to speak with everybody and
for sure.
understand all religions, because actually, through discussing with my friends, I was able to find like a common underlying theme
Mm,
between Hinduism and Islam,
mm,
which is being good people,
mm,
right?
mm,
So I think like through that, I just realized, just be a good person and
mm.
everything will be okay.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
That's very nice. That noble thought process. I think when I see that kind of thing in a young person, I certainly feel very hopeful.
Yeah.
And I'm not, by no means am I implying that that young person that did what they did represents young people. I think it represents misunderstanding. I think it represents some disinformation.
Hmm.
It might even represent some hate that has come from incorrect source.
Yeah.
And so, as a part of correcting or trying to correct this, our mosque, our place of worship where I live, we have put together 5 things. And I'm elaborating those more for the audience. But
Yeah.
since you are my guest, I thought I might as well share it with you. One of them is to really have more information sessions for our neighbors, for our co
Hmm.
workers, for our colleagues in libraries, for example.
Yeah.
Libraries are allowing people to come and make talks. In fact, last Saturday, the library where I live had a story time for young people.
Yeah.
And this was about Ramadan, and it involved basically almost 100 people.
Hmm.
The librarian was saying that she's never had anything like that happen there, but she was amazed by the enthusiasm that people showed. So, without question, people like yourself who are enthusiastic, friendly, and want to know more are in the majority. So, that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is that I promote, is to share with our neighbors. So, for example, you may know this Ramadan is very special in terms of food.
Yeah.
You might have eaten some samosas in Ramadan.
Yeah.
You might have gotten some dates perhaps in Ramadan. And this is because the tradition of food is very much a part of almost all cultures,
Yeah.
where people, when they share things, tend to care for each other. They
Yes.
tend to want to know, okay, what is this all about? And so the second aspect of it is, and this is what I also encourage people to say, share your Ramadan with your neighbors.
Yes.
Maybe give them some dates. Maybe give them a small card. Maybe give them a nice gift of some sort. Doesn't have
Hmm.
to be anything expensive, but it allows the other person to understand, oh, you have something that I don't know anything about. Put a small sign on your lawn. Happy Ramadan.
Yes.
Welcome Ramadan. We share we share goodness with our neighbors. Charity, sacrifice. Sacrifice in what way? Malini, you might know this, but the word sacrifice has now become rare. What does sacrifice mean? Well, sacrifice means you're giving up something for a greater good.
Hmm.
And here, what we're giving up is our ignorance for the sake of a greater good of the society.
Hmm.
So that the society that we live in becomes a society that includes people,
Yeah.
that has a desire to want to know, oh, you came from India, oh, you came from Bangladesh, oh, you came from Egypt. What is it that you do? What are your traditions? What are things that will benefit the society?
Yeah.
The society will benefit from people that can control themselves, that are more disciplined, that are better fathers, that are
Hmm.
better husbands,
Hmm.
that are better neighbors. I mean, this is going to benefit everybody. It's not just going to benefit you and
Yes.
me. So the third aspect of this again is a desire to want to have little, if you like, I put in letters into the editor, put in an article into the local newspaper,
Yeah.
write to them, give them a small synopsis of Ramadan. What is Ramadan all about?
Hmm.
Why do Muslims fast? What do they do when they finish their fasting? A little description of Eid, for example.
Yeah.
A fourth thing about this is to be more visible. Being more visible means that our students in particular have a huge chance, I think, of sharing something that is very, very, I think, in many ways beneficial to the society in general.
Yeah.
I remember a scientist from America. He said if most people started fasting, most diseases would disappear.
Oh.
This is a scientist.
Yes.
He said if most people just understood the value of eating small amounts at fixed amounts as opposed to eating the whole day
Yeah.
in irregular amounts,
Yes.
right? And we are reaching almost epidemic proportions in obesity,
Hmm.
diabetes, high blood pressure. So we're not dealing with just somebody who has some strange tradition. This is actually something that is very powerful and helpful to the wider community. So that aspect of Ramadan, I think, also has to be emphasized.
Yeah.
Our last part, I think, is just that human aspect of saying things. Look, when we do things in a manner where we understand each other, and COVID is a classical example.
Yeah.
People who hated niqab, I'm sure you know what niqab
Yes.
is, right?
Yes.
Were wearing niqabs.
Yeah.
People who hated the idea that they would ever wash their hands, wash their
Yeah.
hands. And so, this is really what I feel we have to share more with people to say Ramadan should make us better people.
Hmm.
Ramadan should make us better in every aspect of our
Yeah.
life. Maybe it doesn't make us perfect, but it's progress, not perfection.
Hmm.
And so I think on that note, I really appreciate your coming and
Yes.
sitting and sharing your thoughts with us. I'm just going to ask our producer whether there's any questions by our audience. And if so, then we'll inshallah take them
Hmm.
quickly, inshallah.
Yes, no questions, but a comment did come in. It says, "Thank you, Manali, for coming on to discuss Ramadan. One of the great parts of living in Canada is having the company of kind and open-hearted people such as yourself." So that was a
Thank
comment
you.
that came in.
And this I think this aspect of it really having our colleagues, our neighbors, and in your case, a school friend,
Yeah.
I think this needs to happen more often
Hmm.
because I think misunderstandings would be removed when dialogue takes place.
Yeah.
When people sit across the table, smile at each other, are able to share each other's tradition, are able to, if you like, just sit in a space where they can listen to what the other person has to say.
Yeah.
And I hope,
Definitely.
inshallah just means God willing,
Yes.
that you are able to come again and elaborate some of your thoughts on some of the other aspects
Hmm.
of which are challenging for our neighbors and our colleagues. And so, once again, I want to thank you very much.
Sorry,
Did-
before you wrap, just one question. So we started a new podcast that's coming on right after this with the two high school students, grade 11, Radena and Malika. I think they're your friends.
Yes.
Should people listen to that podcast? Are they good people? Are they
Definitely.
worth listening to?
Definitely. They're very good people, and you should be listening to that podcast.
So, give us maybe one reason for why people should listen, because you and me know that
Yeah.
people's time is really tight, right?
Yes.
I mean, I've seen people that are scrolling on their WhatsApp and they are just going through video after video until they like something.
Yeah.
And so, if I was to say, Manali, what would be the reason to listen to somebody who of course, you're good friends, you would listen to them.
Yes.
But let's say somebody's not good friends with them. they want to know why would they spend 20 minutes listening to what they have to say. What would your one comment be, or one encouraging reason for them to watch that show would be?
I think it's just to understand the headspace or the mentality of young Muslim women
Okay.
in today's society as well.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
it's not a very common thing
Mm.
that is being shared in the media.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Okay.
you
And
should be definitely watching.
I would share, I would definitely agree with your statement that a lot of these things are not being shared.
Yeah.
And of course, lack of communication means ignorance indirectly. And sadly, ignorance is what leads to many of the things that which cause hate, almost events and crimes.
Yeah.
And almost always I found when people started to talk about something and they described how their hate for something, and there's more than a few people in Europe in particular who have actually started their career as people that were mongering hate and ended up basically becoming, not only changed their tradition, but also became promoter of that
Yeah.
tradition simply through studying, if you like,
Mhm.
simply through meeting up with people of that tradition, and sometimes simply through just taking a little bit more time understanding to say, I'm putting out all this unhappy information about people. Do I actually know them?
Yeah.
Have I even spoke to a single woman? For example, if I dislike hijab, or I dislike the idea of naqab, for example, the cover of the face, do I actually know what's behind this?
Yeah.
And I think you've put it very well when you said that when these things are not being shared, young women like yourself and others could potentially start to feel intimidated and even perhaps scared. I remember somebody who came into one of the mosques and one of the open houses, and the sheikh, the religious leader's wife, was wearing a naqab. You could just see her eyes.
Mhm.
And this sister in humanity became scared. She said, "Oh, look at that." So people said, "Look at what?" And so she said, "Why is she dressed like that?" And people said, "Look, why don't you ask her? She's
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
I think she speaks English." She said, "Oh, you haven't asked her.
Yeah.
You haven't said hello to her. You haven't said, how are you? I'm interested to find out why you do what you're doing. I'm so and so. Put your hand out, smile. Maybe this frozen ice between you two will break, and maybe a beautiful conversation will take place."
Yes.
So I think, mashallah, I really want to thank you once again for coming on and helping us with this topic of Ramadan and how we can make it a little bit better for ourselves and for our neighbors and our colleagues and our co-workers. I also want to thank you, especially from Happy Strong Family, which is the sponsors of this program.
Mhm.
And we would request you to please share this information with your family and your
Of course.
friends.
Yeah.
We hope to, inshallah, see you more on this show in the future in some other regulated conversations.
Thank you so much. Thank
And
you.
on that, our audience, I also want to say thank you, Jazakallah Khair, for being very patient with this conversation. Thank you for comments and questions. And we hope to see you again, inshallah, on another show very soon. Jazakallah Khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam. And before signing off, just a few more comments. Amazing podcast, great and very insightful wisdom from Manali. Thank you so much for coming. Hope to see you more. Wishing you all the best in your life.
Thank you.
Then another one saying, thank you, Manali, for being open to having this conversation. So again, we reiterate what Dr. Rashid said. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll sign off. Thank you.